Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. I've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast for you today. We're being joined by a former recruit of mine, I should say, who's now pitching in the San Diego Padres Organization. So for those of you who enjoy Figured Out podcasts with pro players, I think you'll really like this one. We're being joined today by Aaron Leasher, who's a left-handed pitcher in the San Diego Padres Organization. He's a really good person and having a really good minor league career, and he's very much on the verge of breaking into the big league. So it's a great time to have him on the podcast. I'm excited to catch up with him. You know, it's been a couple years since Aaron and I have really caught up, so I'm excited about all of it. I'll give you a quick background on Aaron before we jump into questions with him. He is originally from Mount Pleasant, Michigan. He played collegiately at Morehead State, the last place where I coached. And again, I was in the recruiting process with Aaron, but never got a chance to coach him. But I did get a chance to watch him several times there, and had a very good career at Morehead. His junior year, the year that he got drafted, he was a first-team all-conference player in the Ohio Valley Conference. He struck out 105 batters that year. That was third most all-time in a single season at Morehead State. He finished with a 9-3 record that season and a 4.19 ERA. He led the Ohio Valley Conference in wins. And again, that was 2017, the year that he was a sixth-round draft pick by the Padres out of Morehead State. Since then, he's had a very steady career throughout the minor leagues. 2019 and 2021 are probably his best statistical years, but most every season he's put up very similar numbers to one another. In 2021, his most recent season, he split the year between AA and AAA. Overall, pitched 64 2/3 innings, gave up 61 hits, 62 strikeouts to 21 walks. And pitching with his left hand certainly helps a lot. So, Aaron, I certainly appreciate you being on the podcast today, man. I'm excited to get into this one with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to doing this with you.
So I'll typically start with something from the bio that stands out, and I'm probably going to go to something that's maybe not your most pleasant memory ever. I'm going to go back to your freshman year of college, where there were certainly some struggles for you. Now, coming out of high school, you were a really athletic kid who had a good arm, and certainly projected to be a really, really good college pitcher and probably a pro out of high school. That was kind of the way that I looked at you, watching you as a junior in high school. And but your freshman year at Morehead State, you finished with a 9.71 ERA. Your innings pitched to strikeouts were good, and I remember talking with the pitching coach at that time who said he's going to be fine. He just needs to work on a couple things. But, in these podcasts, Aaron, I like to record them and think about the people who are listening. And, I know that we'll have Padre fans listening, but I also know that we'll have plenty of high school coaches, potential student athletes and families that want to athletes and families of athletes that want to play in college. I want to go back to that time and just, if you can recall what it was like your freshman year and maybe some of the struggles that you went through. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that freshman year and, what exactly happened, how that was for you, what it was like, going from, high school in Michigan where you were an all-state pitcher, to going through some struggles as a freshman in college when, you get to a new level and sometimes that happens. I just wonder if you could kind of talk about that time a little bit and maybe what you remember from it.
Yeah, I think, just looking back and being able to pitch first and foremost my freshman year as much as I did, I think that alone kind of, just having that opportunity and knowing there's going to be some struggles along the way, I think that was big for me. I think you see a lot of guys, especially at the Division I level, get there and have to redshirt or be limited innings-wise, which is not a terrible thing. You can still learn, from those experiences as well. But, like you said, not great numbers-wise, but just knowing, I think I threw, 40, 50-plus innings my freshman year, which is extremely helpful to kind of grow and learn from. And again, I think the biggest thing as an athlete or as a baseball player is learning from your failures, learning from your struggles. It's going to happen at any stage of your career. You're going to have struggles. You're going to have times where things aren't working out. But I think if you look at it as a positive and know you're going to grow from it and move on in the right direction, those things can be beneficial. So, yeah, I think looking back at that year, also coming from, Michigan and baseball in the Midwest is a little different than, say California or Texas or down south, Florida, or whatever. So just going from that level of baseball into Division I, again, kind of realizing there's going to be struggles there, and kind of just taking it for what it is. Having good teammates around me, having good coaching staff around me, and good family around me, and again, just kind of learning from that experience and growing from it, and making sure the mistakes that were made, that freshman year, don't continue into that summer, playing summer ball, and then, into next spring for the following sophomore year. So I think you just kind of, learn from those bumps in the road and make the most out of it. And again, just the coaching staff and the guys that I had around me, it was pretty easy to kind of learn from those things. And, having guys around me that had went through similar struggles, years previous, and kind of seeing the progressions they've made, that was big for me as well. And, just continuing to grow and continuing to move on.
So what did you learn that freshman year that you were able to take into your sophomore year? Your sophomore year, you dropped your ERA. Now, ERA at Morehead State always needs an asterisk next to it. If anybody is familiar or unfamiliar with the stadium at Morehead State, it is a very, very difficult place to pitch. So from your freshman year, you finished with a 9.71 ERA. As a sophomore, it was 4.57. And then just to give some perspective, as a junior, you were first team all conference with a 4.19 ERA, which may seem high, for college pitchers, but that landed you from a mid-major as a sixth-round pick. So obviously there's pitching at Morehead State numbers are skewed for sure. But you obviously made huge strides from freshman to sophomore year. What kind of adjustments did you make, Aaron? What did you learn from that freshman year that you were able to take into your sophomore year to end up having a pretty successful season there?
I think it was a number of things. Just overall progress of maturing as a pitcher, as a person. I think, again, I wasn't in high school. High school baseball for me was, I played baseball my whole life. But it was never – I played basketball as well, and that was kind of – I was splitting time between the two. And baseball was truly never something that I put a whole lot of time into, opposed to, basketball. It was kind of a split thing. So I think just the overall time spent at it, where I was dedicating all my time to baseball, learning myself as a pitcher, learning new techniques to help mechanically, or pitch design, or how to attack hitters, or just overall, strength, arm strength, getting in the weight room consistently. So I think a lot of it was just natural progression of putting more time into it. But specifically, with the program we had at Morehead State and working with Graham Johnson, I think pitching plans, how to use my pitches to get people out, in a simple format, again, because I was very kind of new to that level of pitching. So keeping it simple and learning how to attack hitters, and how my stuff plays the best way. And then just kind of overall strength. I think my velo jumped pretty big in that freshman to sophomore year, that summer. And that was kind of the beginning. We talked about this earlier, but that was kind of the beginning of my weighted ball programming with Graham. So I think just overall strength, arm strength, body strength, and being able to kind of know what I wanted to do against hitters and start to realize how my pitches worked with each other. But again, just kind of the overall natural progression of putting more time in and dedicating more time to a specific, plan, and having the people around me that I did to kind of hone in on that plan and make it simple for, someone that, wasn't super in tune with, a deep dive into baseball and how to progress the right way. Just being around the people I was, that was super helpful for me in making that jump.
I'm interested to talk more about some, weighted ball stuff and other things that you do, just training, especially off-season type stuff. But I want to kind of stick on that, talking about just progressing from year to year. And I'd like to talk a little bit about progressing through the minor leagues. I've never coached, never played at that level, but from, read a lot about it and stay pretty in tune with things. And it seems like most of the time when, for guys to get promoted, and I've talked to Graham, by the way, so Aaron has mentioned Graham Johnson here, and Graham was the pitching coach at Morehead State when Aaron was there, and Coach Johnson is now a pitching coach in the Houston Astros organization, and deservedly so. I think last year, 2021, he was the AA pitching coach, and I think he's got a chance to stay at that level as a pitching coach for a long, long time. So he was a really good one. But from talking with Coach, with Graham and some other people, and just, observing, it's from guys to go from level to level, progressing through the minor leagues. There almost needs to be, if this is maybe a simplistic way to say it, but sort of boxes that need to be checked. You go to a new level, you'll have some new struggles. You'll see a higher level of competition, obviously, and you need to, to a point to have a lot of success at that level before you'll get moved up. One of the minor league coaches I've had on here before and talked to him about guys getting promoted, I think he put it that a guy needs to get to a point where he's no longer being challenged at a certain level in order to, in many cases, be promoted to the next level. That's kind of the simplest way that he could put it. When there's not as much of a challenge, he needs a new challenge. He's going to go to the next level. Aaron, for you, going from level to level, were there specific things that specific objectives that you needed to focus on? Maybe, for example, going from one level to the next, you needed to progress with your slider in a certain way, or you needed to be able to pitch backwards to certain guys, or you needed to be able to establish your fastball in, or I don't know what it would be, but were there certain check boxes that you have been asked, by the Padres as an organization to sort of, when you accomplish this, and this, like that's when you will be ready for the next level? Are those conversations that you have as a minor league pitcher, or what exactly do you hear from the organization, from level to level, about what needs to happen for you to keep moving up?
Yeah, so I think every organization kind of has their own boxes that need to be checked in order to get moved up. I think every organization kind of has their game plan and what they want to see from their guys as a whole. And then I think individually, I think they have plans for guys and what they need to work on, and again, what they need to see consistently in order for them to kind of move up through the ranks. So for me personally, I know the Padres were big on fastball strike percentage, being able to throw your fastball for strikes. And that was something I was always pretty good at, and something that, they always wanted me to improve upon as well, just to get it to a level where it was consistently high. Again, another thing for me was, so my splits versus lefties and righties, my splits versus righties is better. Changeup is my best pitch, which kind of makes sense for my splits being better against righties. Typically, you throw more lefty changeups to righties. So another big thing for me was working on a slider, being more consistent with my slider to, get lefties out more consistently, but just figuring out a way to get those splits more even. Typically lefties are more prone to get lefties out. That's, left on left matchups. And it wasn't like my splits were too high, too much of a difference. But again, the lefties should be, hitting worse off me than righties. So I think that was a thing for me moving up through the ranks was, working on a breaking ball that will be consistent enough to get those splits more even, or more sided on the lefties. But yeah, I think every organization kind of has their own plan. And again, you could, a lot of it's just based on opportunity. If you check these boxes and you're doing the right thing and you're doing it consistently, but there's no, shuffling around at the level above you, then sometimes you're not going to get moved. And that's just kind of how it works. It's a tough business, and you can be doing the right things and, having success, and you might not see that promotion. So there's no conversations really to, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to get promoted. But they definitely, like to give you a game plan, and they'll kind of, tell you what they're looking for you to work on. And if you end up doing those things at a high level and consistently, there's a good chance you get moved up and continue to get moved up. So I think especially early on in the minor leagues, when you first get drafted or you first get signed, and you're kind of looking for an outline of, specifically me, I'm going to speak just for myself, but you're kind of looking for what, they want out of you and what they want you to work on in order to get moved up. I think in my later years recently, as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized myself just, throughout my off seasons working with people and, you kind of have to become your own coach in a sense and figure out ways to progress and ways to make yourself better and more valuable. And that alone will kind of put you in the position to start moving up. And I think there's organizations have like a specific plan for certain guys and what they want to see to move up. And I think as an org, they kind of just have, a bulk of what they're looking for in order to progress. And typically they're pretty transparent with that, and they want to, see you execute those things and continue to progress those things.
For Aaron Leasher to be a successful big leaguer, what boxes do you think that you need to check?
I think we talked about a little bit earlier before the podcast, but a more consistent breaking ball. Like I said, my splits against lefties are over my course of my career have been a little bit worse than to the righties. So I think working on that left on left breaking ball to a more consistent rate to kind of get lefties out more consistently, and then just increase velo. I think average velo, like I said, I'm able to throw hard to a certain point, and then throughout a season I start to lose it a little bit. So I think sustained velo throughout a season would definitely help me there, and staying consistent with that. And then just a more consistent breaking ball, and that's going to help my changeup a lot too, which, like I said, is my best off-speed pitch. It's going to open up a lot of things for me. So I like the path I'm on right now. I think I'm doing a lot of the right things and working with a lot of right people that are, kind of helping me progress in the way I want to. And I think it's just finding new ways. I think people, even I was a victim of this, was just kind of getting stagnant and trying to do the same things that got me to where I am. And I think there's a happy medium of doing that and not losing who you are as a pitcher. But at the same time, baseball's evolving. All these players are evolving. People are trying new things. And I think you kind of need to go outside your comfort zone a little bit with some of that stuff and start to progress and learn new ways to, help yourself get better. So, like I said, I think I'm in a good spot and just working on things that I've been working on the past couple off seasons with breaking balls and being more in tune with the pitch design part of it, and just trying new things, whether it's pitch grips or sight levels with the catcher or whatever it is. Just kind of bouncing ideas off of other guys that are might have better success with things that I'm trying to work on improving in order to round out my game. So, I think those are probably the two biggest things, though. It's just a more consistent breaking ball and increased average velo is probably what I'm working on right now.
Do guys at your level do things like that, like mess with grips and just kind of, I don't want to say fool around, but basically fool around with different stuff just to kind of see if you find a pitch that just has a better feel, or like you throw one and you throw a slider and maybe it's just the first one you throw is like you feel something and you see the sharp break and you're like, man, maybe this is something I need to stick with. Like, do you have those kind of conversations with guys? Is that something that people at your level do to try to maybe just see if there's something better? Not to like change pitches necessarily, but like, do you mess with your slider grip at all based on like what other guys are doing, or maybe what other coaches maybe like suggest something? Is that something you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest pieces of professional baseball, honestly, is just you have all these guys around you that are at the same level as you, that come from different places, that have learned from different people, and it'd be silly to just ignore that. I think there's tons of guys out there that'll have all this information and be willing to share that. So yeah, I think whether it's off season or in season or spring training or whatever it is, even just watching guys and how they work and their routines, and I think you can take bits and pieces from just about everybody. You're always learning, you're always trying new things, and for me specifically, when I've struggled with slider consistency, I've always been willing to kind of try new things, and especially in bullpens. Now the last couple of years, every bullpen that we throw in season specifically, we have Rapsodo connected. So you're sitting there with your pitching coach, and depending on the bullpen, throwing 25, 30 pitches, and if you're working on a specific pitch that day, say you're throwing sliders, you'll probably throw 10 to 12 of them. maybe more, you can kind of throw a pitch and then dissect it with the numbers and then obviously the eye test and everything like that. So I think there's multiple ways to kind of try new things and learn new ways to pitch and just new grips and everything. And one of those main things is definitely just bouncing ideas off other guys and just watching them how they work.
I want to go back a little bit, Aaron, to something you said earlier. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that in high school you played basketball as well as baseball. And I knew that when I was recruiting you, and I'll give my feelings about that later, but I don't want to I guess I don't want to put any ideas in your head before I ask the question. I recently kind of had a back and forth with a big leaguer that I know a little bit on Twitter about Multisport Athletes. And someone posted something and I commented and then a big leaguer commented to me, and then we kind of went back and forth a little bit. But I'm curious to know someone who did that in high school. You were a good basketball player in addition to being a good baseball player. And if I'm not wrong, did your parents play basketball at a pretty high level, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I think you're thinking of somebody else. My brother coached basketball for a while and played collegiately.
That's what
that might be what you're thinking of.
Okay, anyway, you're a good basketball player in high school. If you were talking to somebody now, whether it was a friend of your family or a younger cousin who was, 15, 16 years old, and they kind of thought like, well, I want to play baseball in college for sure, but I really like this other sport, basketball, football, soccer, whatever, ice hockey. Would you encourage that person to play multiple sports all through high school? Again, knowing exactly how your path worked, or do you think that it's better to focus on one main sport? And who knows, maybe if you focus just on baseball instead of going to Morehead State, maybe you would have went to, I don't know, Louisville or somewhere like that. I have no idea. But if you were talking to someone like you at like, freshman, sophomore year in high school whose future was probably in baseball, what would you say to them about playing multiple sports?
Yeah, I've seen that argument quite a bit as well, and I see both sides of it. For me specifically, I felt like playing multiple sports, looking back at it, was definitely the right choice. Like I said, my time was kind of split between basketball and baseball, and honestly, basketball was kind of my primary sport up until probably my junior, early senior year, and then that's kind of when I realized baseball was probably the route for me. But I think it's important to play multiple sports. I really do. I think just as being a kid alone, just like if you're honing in on one sport, you're feeling like you're missing out on other things if you're able to play other sports, if you're good enough to play other sports, and that's something you did growing up when you were younger. I think that alone, just being a kid and enjoying that, because now that I'm at this level that I'm at, it obviously still enjoy it, love baseball, love what I'm doing, but it's a business and it becomes a job, and it's a little different aspect than it is when you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. So I think it's important to play multiple sports simply for the fact of being a kid. And, the other points that people say and come up with are, not burning out on baseball, not playing however X amount of games throughout the year, traveling all over the place. And that kind of goes into it too. And kind of spreading out your time evenly and not burning out with one thing and then kind of losing, you can lose a passion for it. If you're a kind of a kid developing and you're doing it because you're told you have to, or because you're good at it and you're playing year round, and it kind of becomes a burden. That was never a case for me. Like I said, I was playing multiple sports and wasn't really burned out on baseball or basketball or anything like that. But I do think I see that now. Kids will it's like a job for them already in high school, and that can affect them. And obviously it's case by case. You'll see kids that are playing baseball year round and it'll pay off for them. It'll be a first, second round pick, and that kind of progresses that way. But I know my path and, what I did in high school, playing multiple sports, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. I think that was, doing that, playing multiple sports in high school, some of the best experiences of my life were traveling around playing both of those. And, I think that alone, just being a kid and being able to kind of do what your friends are doing and what you enjoy doing, and not fully committing to something at that young an age and kind of burning yourself out. So again, I see both sides of it, but I just know my experience of playing multiple sports was beneficial, and it's helped me get to where I'm at today for sure.
With the situation like with your brother as an example, like maybe there's other kids out there that maybe don't know what their sport is until their junior or senior year. Like I get if you're not very good at one sport and you're clearly better at something than another. People kind of saying early on, well, hey man, you got a real chance to play baseball at a high level, but all those things that you mentioned I think are very real. The burnout of a particular sport, I don't think that can be underestimated, because I don't know any 15 or 16-year-olds or whatever that can do kind of one thing year round and be totally excited about it and have their heart in it all year round for years at a time. It's a little different when you're like when you go to college. I think as an 18-year-old, you're mature enough to really kind of focus on that and focus on one thing year round. But even I think sometimes it's not always easy even for college athletes to kind of not go through the motions at some point. I think that's a real thing even at that level. But I certainly think with high school athletes, there's something to playing one sport to kind of stay fresh. The argument that was started that I commented on was essentially, if you want to play in college, I can't see any reason to play. Can't think of one good reason to play another sport. Playing basketball is not going to help you throw harder, kind of a thing. And it's like, well, I mean, you're right to a point. And I think the one scenario that I could see it making sense to play just one sport is, say, for example, that you want to pitch in college, but your velocity is more, if you're a left-handed pitcher, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the day I came to see you, you were like 82 to 86, and I thought, well, okay, he plays more than one sport. He's athletic, and I think the second game of your doubleheader that day, you played center field. And it was like, I can see this guy, throwing a lot harder and just, doing a lot more than he's doing right now. And, but just say that you were that same pitcher, but instead of being 82 to 86 at that point in your career, just say you were more like 78 to 82. And you definitely thought you wanted to pitch in college. Like I can see taking a year or two to focus on development and focus on gaining velocity. But, one of the things that I said in this Twitter conversation was, I think if you look at like SEC schools, for example, or any Power 5, I guess, that commits a guy. I just saw a thing on Twitter today about a 2025 grad committing to Vanderbilt, and like that kid hasn't played a game as a freshman in college or in high school yet, and he's committed. But I bet that if you talk to those Power 5 coaches that are committing kids as freshmen and sophomores, I bet a lot of them would say that they would recommend that those kids play multiple sports between the time they commit and the time they get to college, which, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think the majority of guys would say that. And I think the majority of coaches would say that, but I also think that says a lot about the value of multiple sports and not playing one sport year round. Like, why would that SEC coach or, an ACC coach want a guy to play multiple sports year round after they commit as a freshman? Well, I've got to believe that part of the reason why would be so guys don't get burned out mentally, but also so guys don't get hurt. Anyway, I'd like to take that poll sometime, but that was just a thought that I had, and I thought it was interesting to ask you since you went through that as a high school athlete. Do you think things would have been different for you, Aaron, if you had only played baseball? Like, do you think you'd have went somewhere different? Do you think that your trajectory would have been any different? I know that's maybe a hard question to ask, but do you think things would have been any different for you had you just focused on baseball, maybe trained year round for the last, maybe your sophomore, junior year, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that of being a possibility. If you're doing something, again, it kind of goes back to spending time and putting time into something that you're going to see more benefits from it the more time you put in. So, but for me, looking back, I think the way I did it was nice because of the fact that I liked basketball and because of the fact that I had friends that were playing that, and I was a kid and I wanted to do those things. And I think if I were to have just stuck to baseball, I could have very easily burned out on that, knowing that there was other things out there I wanted to do. But because I was better at baseball, I was doing just baseball, and I think that would have potentially kind of ruined, could have ruined baseball for me. But at the same time, I think, the more time you put into something, the better results you're going to see. So, but like you said, it's kind of just case by case. You're just talking about a guy that's throwing 75 to 80, but is playing multiple sports but knows he wants to play college baseball. It's like, well, if your velo's like that and you're playing, 2-3 sports, that really doesn't make sense, because, the progression of, where you're trying to go, it needs to be, a lot more advanced. It needs to happen a lot quicker in order to get you in a spot to be at a good school and to have the ability to play. So I think it's all case by case. I think if you're, looking back the way you were just talking about how you scouted me, it was, I was playing center field the second game of that doubleheader. I was a basketball player. I think all those things go into projections, which is a lot of what scouting is. You're looking at a guy and saying, this is what he is now. What can he be, 2-3 years down the road? So I think that goes a big part into it, is seeing a guy that plays multiple sports, realizing he's a good athlete if he's able to play those sports at a high level, and knowing what he's at now and knowing what he's going to be at later because of the fact that he's able to play these sports and play them at a high level. So I think it's all case by case, but there's definitely situations where, if a guy's sticking to one sport and he's looking for those progressions, they're probably going to happen a lot quicker. But again, it kind of goes back to just being a kid and being able to do things that you want to do at that level. Because if you're fortunate enough to play, professionally and play a long career, it becomes a business. It becomes a job, and you'll see that eventually. And so for the time being, when you're a kid, I think it's important to do, what you want to do. It's going to help you mentally down the road, and not feel like you're, getting shorted on anything. No experiences are going to be left behind in the high school years.
You mentioned that, just talking about projectability with guys, and kind of, when you're scouting high school players at 15, 16, 17 years old, you have to do a lot of that. But that to me is the hardest thing about scouting, is trying to project what a kid is going to look like 4 years from now. And, it's a very, very inexact science, but something that I think worked for me as a scout was finding guys who, like you, who played multiple sports, were athletic in general, were good at another sport, could go out and play center field when you weren't pitching. Like, those kind of things to me were about as sure of a thing as I could have, that this kid is going to get better. Whereas the kid who plays baseball year-round, trains year-round, to me, that guy was a lot harder to project whether or not he was going to get better. And I felt like with a guy like that, I needed to be sure that his present ability was already good enough to play for us. Whereas like you, it was like I came back and talked to Coach Johnson about you and I said, I don't know why I can remember this conversation about you, but I can't. I just said I think he's going to play pro ball. I think he's going to be a 90 arm from the left side, and I think he's really good. I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. And that was mostly projection. I mean, I can still remember sitting there watching your game, and you threw a couple of really good sliders and a couple of sliders that didn't do anything, and a bunch of sliders kind of right in the middle. And I don't even remember seeing a changeup from you, maybe one changeup in that game, and which is now probably your best off-speed pitch. And but there was a lot going into it, but those were things to me that I liked. I liked you came from an athletic family, and stuff like that I think means a lot and makes it easy to project on some guys. Aaron, I want to talk a little bit about your off-season work that you're doing right now, and we talked about some of this a little bit, I guess, but and some of this we talked about before we started recording. But in the off-season, I just had a podcast yesterday with a minor league position player, and he took a little bit of time off from lifting after the season, and now he's going hard after. He's lifting hard 4 days a week. That's a position player. As a pitcher, how much focus for you goes into your off-season weight room routine? Are you trying to make significant noticeable gains in the weight room, or is it different for a pitcher, different objectives than what a position player might have? I'm just curious about your off-season workout plan starting in the weight room.
Yeah. So for me, every off-season, trying to get stronger is kind of the first and foremost biggest thing for me. Is just there's always room for improvement in different areas, and finding out my biggest thing, and this has been the last couple off seasons, is finding out my deficiencies, finding out the weakest parts of my body and the weakest parts of my mechanics or whatever it is. And the gym I'm working out at here in Arizona is very good at dissecting that and putting programs together that work on those deficiencies and also make sure that your strengths continue to be your strengths. So, every off season I go into it, trying to get stronger. And just the last couple off seasons, it's been more of a detailed oriented plan opposed to just lifting a bunch of weight and, eating the right things and making sure I'm getting stronger, but actually now knowing, the certain things that need to get stronger and the certain areas I need to improve upon. So I think every off season, that's kind of the plan is just to get stronger and get the most out of my body is pretty much what it comes down to. Is everybody's body moves differently. Every pitcher moves differently down the mound. Every pitcher has a different arm action. You'll see guys that have similarities, and that helps when you're able to look at a guy that has similar mechanics or whatever it may be, and kind of see how they work and stuff like that. But for the most part, everyone's different, and just kind of having an individualized plan of what's going to help you progress and what's going to help you get stronger. Usually, typically early in the off season, take maybe a week or two off from everything, kind of give the body a rest, and then kind of progress back into it. This off season was a little different for me. I got hurt about halfway through the season, and wasn't throwing for about a little over a month. And then towards the end of the season, started to progress throwing again. So typically I'd take, 2 to 3 weeks off of throwing, maybe more, depending on the workload that year. But this year I kind of threw all the way through because I already had that break in the middle of the season. So, that's kind of another big thing. And that's all individual too, is, you'll see guys that don't put down a baseball the entire year. Their volume and their intensity might be light at the beginning of the off season. They'll throw 3 times a week, super light, just to keep the arm moving. And then there's some guys that will put a baseball down for a month and just completely give their arm a blow and go from there. But, this, like I said, this off season was a little different on the throwing side. Kind of already had a break in the middle of the season, and then continued to throw through my normal break period. But then in the weight room, just lifting 3-4 times a week and having a very good idea of, why I'm doing certain exercises and, programming the right things to make sure that I'm working on my deficiencies and making sure that, when spring training rolls around in 2-3 months here, that, those weaknesses are much stronger than they were towards the end of the season last year. So.
This podcast today is brought to you by Diamond Kinetics. No matter what season you're in, our friends at Diamond Kinetics are here to help you train smarter and get better so you can dominate on the field this season. DK's line of mobile-based motion technology products give players and coaches the ability to practice smarter, practice more effectively, and have more confidence in the batter's box and on the mound. DK's Pitch Tracker Smart Baseball and mobile app provides an easy-to-understand data, metrics, and pitching analysis right at your fingertips. You'll immediately see velocity, spin rate, and spin direction on all of your pitches. And newly updated features such as the auto pitch detection, plus newly added metrics such as spin efficiency and horizontal and vertical break help you get command and control over your entire arsenal of pitches. With Diamond Kinetics, you will train smarter and get better and have more confidence on the field this spring. So, Aaron, that's kind of what you're doing in the weight room right now. What about a throwing program? I think this is something that high schools struggle with sometimes, partly because they don't see their guys enough or maybe even early enough. But can you just kind of talk about what your off-season throwing program looks like? Not just like your ramp up and things like that, but, are you in the off-season, are you working to – working on a specific pitch, trying to get your spin rate up, trying to get your spin rate down for your changeup, trying to get, anything in particular that you work on in a typical offseason, whether it's this one or a past one, once you start your throwing program, or is it mainly just kind of ramping up so that your arm is in shape and ready to go in spring training, and then you work with your pitching coaches there? Kind of curious about the offseason throwing program that you normally go into.
Yeah, so this is my second offseason implementing weighted balls into my throwing program. So in college was the first experience I had with weighted balls. Graham Johnson was big on weighted balls, and I felt really comfortable with that programming then. And then once I left Morehead, kind of let go of weighted balls a little bit, just because I didn't have that exact plan anymore, and I know there's a little bit of risk with them. And if I didn't have a outlined plan that I knew I was doing and I knew the progression of it, I didn't really want to get into it. So I took a little bit of a break from the weighted balls, and then the last 2 off seasons I've started to implement it again. And so that's kind of been the biggest thing is every day I'll start with my weighted ball program, and that's kind of my warm up and or heavy load for the day. And then the progression is basically just kind of, for me now, is basically just a feel. So like I said, I took about a little over a month during the season of no throw to recover from an injury, and then started to progress towards the end of that season, and then have thrown through the off season thus far. So it's kind of just a slow progression. I'll do my weighted balls, and then I'll throw lightly, for low volume, low intensity. I think I started 3 to 4 times a week of throwing, usually maybe Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, something like that. And then just kind of progress from there on how I feel, knowing that, February is when, spring training will start, and, having to get off the mound, with hitters before that, probably a couple weeks before that, and then getting off the mound previous to that with bullpens and stuff like that. So I know certain guys have specific plans and certain days they throw and the amount of throws. For me, it's more based off feel. I have my routine with weighted balls that I do every day. I know that's going to stay the same, and there's progression to that as well. And then the baseball side of things, kind of just to feel. I do like long toss. It's not a huge part of my program. I think certain guys, love long toss, and that's something they implement all the time. I do long toss, but again, it's not something that I'm huge on, and I can get something out of I can get a similar feel of long toss through other forms of whether it's pull downs or more volume or whatever it is. So yeah, and then the progression of the throwing program for me is, like, again, just based off feel, and then I'll get off a mound. Typically get off a mound early to mid-January. And when I say get off a mound, that's like starting bullpens. Right now I will throw off a mound my weighted balls, and eventually start to do some touch and feels and start to work on things that I want to work on this off season. But early to mid-January is probably when I'll get off a mound and have pretty high intensity and treat it like a full bullpen. And then specific things that I'm working on, pitch design wise, is slider. That's something that I want to key in on. My changeup is, like I've mentioned, is probably my most consistent, best off speed, and I feel really comfortable with that. And obviously you got to stay in tune with that and make sure you're not losing anything there. But slider for me is something that I need to make more consistent, and I think that starts with being more knowledgeable on what makes a good slider. So, getting off the mound and trying new grips, getting feedback from other guys, pitching coaches, other players, and just seeing the results after throwing, certain grips, certain arm angles, certain different cues that at release or whatever it may be, and just being able to make that more consistent. So that's kind of my thing this off season is, once I do get off the mound more consistently and start to throw that slider a bit more, is just being able to hone in on that and figuring out my cues and figuring out what's going to make me be more consistent with it. Because there's times where that slider is really good and I can throw it where I want to, and it's got the action on it that I want it to, but it hasn't been consistent enough for me to be happy with it and continue to progress with it. So that's kind of how my throwing program goes. I think everyone's, again, a little different with theirs. Some people have a more outlined thing and very strict on what they're doing. I kind of go to feel with the baseball side of things and make sure my weighted ball stuff stays pretty routine. Again, because I know there's not a lot of room for error there when you're throwing, heavier balls than you're used to. So you got to stay kind of in tune with that stuff and make sure you're doing it the right way and staying safe with it. But yeah, it's a pretty normal progression for me throughout the off season. And the end goal is obviously making sure you're ready when games roll around, and make sure your arm's in a good position to be able to compete at a high level.
Is the off-season throwing program, is that your call? Is it the Padres? Is it did they give you some suggestions and you have a little bit of room to play with it?
Yeah, so they will typically give you a throwing program towards the end of every season for the off season, and again, it kind of just outlines throwing progressions and distances at certain dates. They've started to implement weighted ball stuff if people are doing that, kind of their choice there. For me, at this stage of my career, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, probably off the podcast, but at this point in my career, you kind of just have to be your own coach, because you know yourself the best. You got to be self-efficient. You got to rely on knowing what is best for you. And obviously, I've been along this entire journey with myself, and I know where I've been at and the things that work for me. So for me, my throwing program is kind of my thing, but it definitely is bits and pieces of what the Padres have given me, and whether it's been beginning of my career with them or stuff they've given me throughout the career, or the throwing programs they give in the off season. It's kind of a combination of all that. But again, just kind of knowing what I know and continuing to progress with who I am specifically. A lot of that comes from within, and just bouncing ideas off other guys, and being able to kind of just understand who I am as a pitcher.
You've mentioned a couple times now just the kind of relying on some other guys in the minor leagues for one thing or another, whether it's teammates or whatever. And I know that you mentioned at Morehead State it helped you to have some older guys that at the time when you got there as a freshman that had gone through the same thing as you and kind of were there to help you along a little bit. Have there been any mentors for you in the minor leagues that have been more influential than others? Players, coaches, whoever it may be, Aaron, just guys that have kind of taken under their wing a little bit and have really put some time and effort into making sure that you're the best that you can be, and to kind of help you through some difficult times or whatever. Are there any guys that, if I kind of say that, any guys that stand out, any guys that have been there with you through a lot of your progression and a lot of your time in the minors?
Yeah, definitely a lot of guys that have been there. First guy that comes to mind is a buddy of mine named Tyler Higgins, who's 4 or 5 years older than me. He's been playing professional baseball for a while. We actually went to the same high school in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. He's, like I said, 4 or 5 years older, so we didn't actually go to school, but families know each other, grew up in the same town. And when I got drafted, we connected, and at this point, he was probably 4 or 5 years into minor league baseball. So he was super helpful for me, and kind of giving me an idea of what to expect from any perspective, whether it's baseball side or travel side or off-season plans. Just anything that he's experienced, he was very helpful with that, and still have a good relationship with him today. And he's actually playing over in Japan, doing really well over there. So he's the first guy that comes to mind. He's been super helpful, and he's experienced a lot. He's been with a handful of different organizations, and like I said, he's playing over in Japan now. So he's seen a lot. He's done a lot, and having someone like that in my corner that's able to kind of give me an idea of what to expect, and he's very helpful with that. And just the baseball side, he's a baseball nut. He's knows a lot of stuff, and kind of just easy to talk to as far as pitch progressions and how to face hitters, and just anything baseball related. So he's been helpful for me. Padres-wise, there's a couple pitching coaches I feel really comfortable with. Pete Zamora is a guy that's been a pitching coach with us for a while, and he's kind of moved up. I've had him at 2 different levels now. I guess 3 different levels. He was with me when I first got drafted. He was the AZL pitching coach, and then he was the pitching coach in 2019 in Lake Elsinore. I had him there. And then this year in San Antonio, he was my pitching coach AA. So he's kind of progressed with me, which has been nice, because especially in this line of work, there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of new faces typically. It's kind of a revolving door. But So he's been a guy that I feel super comfortable with, and know that what he's telling me is factual, and I just really trust his opinion. And he played. He had a pretty long minor league career too, so he's played, and he's easy to relate to in that manner. But again, there's a lot of guys, some more impactful than others, but I think over the course of a career, you play long enough, you're going to have tons of guys that you can pinpoint, who's helped you the most, and even if it's a small bit of information or even just picking something up from watching them, there's tons of ways to learn, and I've been pretty lucky to have some of the people in my professional career that have helped me, progress the way I have.
You're to the level of minor league baseball now where I'm sure that you've I don't know if you've gotten to know, but have at least been around and kind of had some time around some big leaguers. Whether it's at spring training or whether it's minor league rehab assignments or whatever it may be. Have you had a moment where you had an encounter with a big leaguer that was just a really cool experience where you sort of were like, holy cow, like I'm here, like I'm here with this guy. I have a chance to pitch on this guy's team in a couple years. I don't know whether it's a big name or whether it was just a cool experience. Have you had anything like that? Have you had any experience like that that was just sort of like almost like a wow moment? Like I actually have a shot here. I'm almost like you step back and like I'm pitching at a pretty high level of pro ball here, and I just talked to so and so, and I've got a chance to really do something here and actually pitch for the Padres. Have you had anything like that since you've become a pro, Aaron?
I wouldn't say there's been like an aha moment or anything like that where it's been kind of like a blaring moment, but this past spring training, last year's spring training, I got an invite to big league camp, and was able to kind of mostly just watch some of these guys like Yu Darvish and Joe Musgroves and guys like that, watch their routines, watch how they work, just kind of watch their day to day, and a little bit of bouncing ideas off them, and really just kind of getting a feel for what makes them tick, what things they're working on, what progressions they're trying to work on. And so that was a really cool experience for me, just being around those guys that have been doing it for so long, and just to see them continue to learn. They're never not learning, they're never not trying new things. It's a very unique skill set that these guys have, and they're not satisfied with anything. They know that, like I mentioned earlier, baseball is evolving, and you got to try new things. You got to be, comfortable trying new things and kind of expanding on what's gotten you to that point. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's been like an aha moment of any sort. But there's definitely, specifically in that spring training last year where just seeing guys work, and I've taken things from their routines and kind of implemented it into mine, and been able to see those guys and how they do things. And that's been big for me, is just seeing guys that have been doing it for so long and doing it at a high level for so long, and seeing their routines and realizing that you never stop learning. There's always stuff out there, there's always information out there, and if you want to do it for as long as you can, then you got to continue to be a student and figure out new ways to make yourself a better pitcher.
Did you actually ask questions to those kind of guys? Did you have conversations with them, or did you sort of just take the position like, I'm just going to sit back and listen and watch and just kind of observe and learn what I can learn from, kind of from afar? Did you, was it intimidating to be around them? Did you get a chance to talk to them at all, or what was that experience like for you?
So this spring training was a little different. So it was mostly from afar. It was almost split. Typically spring training, minor league and major league spring training are typically at the same time. But because of COVID last year, they delayed minor league spring training and just had big league spring training as the only people in the complex. But with that, they kind of had – it wasn't two spring trainings, but it was kind of split as far as backfields, and just certain groups would stick together because of kind of COVID-related stuff, and make sure it was the same group of people together every day. So most of that stuff was from afar. There was a few casual conversations or just kind of group conversations where you're throwing a bullpen and there's 12 mounds, and you got pitching coaches and you got guys throwing bullpens and you're kind of waiting in line or you're waiting around for a bullpen or you finish your bullpen and you stick around and you just hear the dialogue between, one of those guys that have been doing it forever and a pitching coach. And you're like, all right, well, this information is super beneficial. I'm going to take this in. I'm going to soak it in. So a lot of that stuff was kind of from afar, especially because of the way that spring training was formatted, with it being a lot less people there than typical, and they kind of break it up and keep it a little, I guess, more safe with COVID and everything. So, most of it was from afar, but there was a few conversations here and there. And, again, just kind of, that's never going to be something that I stop doing. I think you'll see guys with 10 plus years of big league experience that are still, learning from guys and finding new ways to pitch. So that's something that I'm going to continue to do throughout my career.
One last question before I let you go. We spend the whole hour here talking about baseball, but I think it's, sometimes when you observe athletes, that's all that they are to you is an athlete. And, in this case, we spend this whole time talking about baseball, but, obviously you guys have lives outside of baseball. You've got a family, you've got, you do other things, you have other interests besides baseball. Aaron, if I can just kind of finish up with one non-baseball related question. If you, and maybe this is something you hadn't thought of before, but if you weren't playing baseball, what would Aaron Leasher be doing right now at this point in your life? Any idea?
I don't know. I was studying business management. I know that much in college. I love sports across the board. Anything sports related, is something I would take interest in. But honestly, never really had that thought. By the time I was kind of looking at the next step of, what I was going to be doing with a degree, what was going to happen after college, I started to realize, I was going to have a chance to play professional baseball. And I'm kind of the guy that I don't want to say puts all his eggs in one basket, but if I'm going to be doing something, I want to be all out. Not that I don't have, backup plans or anything like that, but I would think I would stay in sports in some capacity. Not exactly sure what that would look like, maybe on the business side of things, or getting in the front office someday, or I don't know about coaching or scouting, but I think, those things would be interesting too. But yeah, I don't have a specific, backup plan, but I do know that staying in sports would be, something I would take an interest in.
Once you're in, and that's kind of the life you live, it's hard to not be in that arena anymore, which you and I can talk about that someday if it gets to that, what it's like, but it's as long as you can stay, whether you're a player or a coach or a scout, like you said, it's kind of one of those things. I think baseball maybe, and probably other sports are very similar too, but once you're in it, it's hard to imagine doing anything that's unrelated. Yeah. So, Aaron, this has been really fun. It's been a really enjoyable. This is Aaron Leasher, everyone, who he's a left-handed pitcher in the San Diego Padres minor league organization, and hopefully you'll be seeing him on the big league field in the next couple of years. Aaron, I appreciate the time today. I always enjoy following you and kind of seeing how you're doing. And of course, I don't like to, I typically don't reach out to guys during seasons much, just to let you focus on things and not get your mind off of things that it needs to be on. But just know that, I've followed you since, from your career at Morehead State and in the minor leagues, and, just really wish you all the success in the world. I think you're a great kid, and anybody that's listening to this podcast to this point, you're more than just a guy that throws to your left arm. I think you're obviously a pretty bright guy who's got an idea of what you're doing and what needs to happen for you to get where you want to go. And you're a really well-spoken person, and clearly someone who's given your profession a lot of thought. So I appreciate all the time you've given today, all the questions you answered, and just appreciate you being a guest on a podcast.
Yeah, Jeff, I appreciate you having me on. It was a good time, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon.